Hello there. So, Friday night was party night in Downing Street. Every Friday night. I said in a video yesterday that it looked to me like those that lived and worked in Downing Street had turned the place into a nightclub, because they suddenly realised shutting down the hospitality sector would affect their own social lives as well. They now had no raucous pubs and clubs to go to, so converted number 10 for the purpose. And right on cue, we hear that booze was brought in by the suitcase full and popped inside a fridge freshly purchased for that very purpose, and then they'd party every Friday like it was 1999. And this has been dubbed by some as a fridge too far, obviously after the famous war film A Bridge Too Far. And while some might not like it, Boris Johnson is at the top and lives in Downing Street, so he will take most of the flak for all of this. Now, much has been made about the unique mix of the number 10 and 11 living quarters with the working areas, and how the garden had a dual family and business usage, and some tried to use that to excuse the confusion between what was lawful and what was not when compared to the rest of us. But that's not acceptable, because the question is, what would be the rules for, say, an accountant or photographer that works from home and for much of the time uses an office or studio at home, and to get to that office or studio, clients would have to traipse through the rest of the house? And would those clients have been free to mix with the family of the professional they were there to consult with? For me, the issue was that Downing Street did not appear to do enough to separate the workspaces from the residential spaces and keep them completely separate. The garden, for example, should have been designated as one or the other. And if it was all too difficult, then extra offices elsewhere should have been secured for government use. Anyway, the route they took was to have the Wine Time Fridays, which were handily programmed into their e-diaries of 50 number 10 staff between 4 p.m. and 7 p.m. every Friday. And according to the Times, one insider said, "It was a culture of 3 a.m. sessions. People used to sleep off their hangovers in the buildings overnight on sofas, and in the mornings there were empty drinks on the desks that the cleaners had to pick up. There was a culture of boozing." Sounds worse than I feared. So while people couldn't get to see their doctors or their elderly relatives or attend funerals and weddings, the powers that be were drunkenly cavorting literally down the corridors of power. And the Mail says, "The end-of-week drinks are a part of a long-standing tradition in government, but they reportedly continued while the rest of the country were mostly confined to their homes. They were organised by the number 10 press office, but advisers from other departments would often join in, it has been claimed." And one unnamed minister who recently backed Boris over the earlier leaks said it was becoming more and more difficult to support the PM, adding, "This is the last chance saloon." Good choice of word there, eh? More revelations of parties and a pummelling at the local elections, and the party will rise up. Well, I have to say, more revelations are likely, and a pummelling for the Tories at the polls in May is now a baked-in certainty. And what a sorry picture this all paints of Downing Street, our government, ministers, the civil service and the SPADs. And it's also totally obvious that the security people just sat and watched it all happen, with no complaint and no voicing of concerns. And if the security are the police, have they no power of arrest of the people breaking those COVID rules? And remember that the Speaker of the Commons, Sir Lindsay Hoyle, shut the Westminster bars for the duration of the pandemic. So why not the workers across Whitehall, including number 10? Why were they allowed to bring booze through the security cordon? And it's not just the parties either. It's now coming out that their work practices were about as COVID safe as playing sardines with 100 participants, with reports of people being invited in for drinkies because there was nowhere else to go. In truth, Downing Street became the modern form of a speakeasy for the well-connected, while the rest were sentenced to a form of social contact prohibition on pain of fines or worse. And back in June last year, the radio presenter Julia Hartley-Brewer wrote in the Mail not only that the antics of the great and good at the G7 showed how little our betters feared the virus, but also that it was very common knowledge that Downing Street staff ignored the rules themselves. A number of senior sources, including government ministers and aides who frequent Number 10, have confirmed to me that lockdown rules are flagrantly ignored every day in Downing Street, she wrote. While millions of families have been kept apart by COVID restrictions, while thousands of businesses have been destroyed by social distancing requirements, and while the entire population, even children at school, have been forced to wear masks, those working at the heart of our government have arrogantly flouted their own rules. And that's over 6 months ago, remember. And she quoted one source with first-hand knowledge of government operations as saying, "Very few people working in the heart of government have ever worn masks in Number 10 or in most Whitehall departments. They have not missed out on their social lives, as their friends mostly work in politics too, so they generally socialise together." And this also raises an important question. If those at the top had been forced to try and operate under their own rules, would they have put those rules in place for the rest of us in the first place? And more people are latching onto this. Also, how our world leaders all acted at the G20, G7 and COP26 shows that all governments are probably operating in this exact same way. They are sat in the luxury cruise liners while the rest of us are cut adrift in lifeboats. And the other crucial question is, given these work and drinking practices, why weren't they all dropping like flies and ending up on ventilators? Now, yesterday I laid out a few ideas about how Boris could get back in our good books, and it's being reported that he wants to reset his leadership. Funny how the reset word keeps cropping up, isn't it? Anyway, before I get into that, I just want to say a massive thank you to all my Super Thanks, Patreon and PayPal supporters, as well as those that do buy a mug with my mug on it. Links in the descriptions box below. You really do help me keep this channel going. So Boris wants to reset his premiership, does he? Well, the first thing he's going to do, says the Telegraph, is to lift those Plan B restrictions from about the 26th of January. A week and a half away. So COVID passes and working from home are expected to go, although some rules on face coverings might stay. But apart from this, something that was bound to happen anyway given the current data, Boris backers are doing all they can to bolster up his support base, phoning round MPs to keep them from submitting those letters of no confidence, with the aim of keeping the PM afloat until the Partygate investigation by Sue Gray is completed, the report published, and Boris is, they hope, shown to be blame-free. But while Boris is trying to save himself, two of the most likely people to try and replace him at the nation's helm are preparing their ground for a leadership challenge. Rishi Sunak, the Chancellor, is keeping himself at barge pole length from Boris to ensure he is left untainted by all of this. Although being in number 11 throughout this time, wasn't he aware of the partying? And Liz Truss, the Foreign Secretary, allegedly had secret drinks with a small group of MPs in her office on Monday. Wonder if that was within the rules. And while all this goes on, we've had a suspected Chinese spy operating within our democratic system for over a decade, with more probably embedded in the woodwork. and no one at the top apparently really cares about that. Probably because it helped the diversity drive. So, what's your opinion on the Downing Street party nights? Please like and comment below. Please subscribe and like this video, buy a mug and support me on Patreon or PayPal, and thank you for watching.